They should keep the recordings up next week.
Yeah, I don't know. So yes, we're live now, and so you can see what happens there. I think I'm going to close this set of blinds. So here we are. This is Roman numeral 4. And we're going to see Rome begin to decline into a dictatorship. Now, John Green highlighted a number of things in the video that you watched. And again, you can go back and watch that on your own if you'd like to review through that, especially when we get up toward the test time, because he gives us a broad perspective. He throws a lot of information in a short period of time. But it's a great review tool. And so we are going to see the republic transform into a dictatorship, and I use the term decline here, and it kind of depends on whether, on your perspective, I think I'm a slide ahead. I need to go back here to capital letter A, problems. Those of you that are taking old-fashioned notes on paper, I know I just frustrated you. I'm sorry.
No, I was excited because I have so many scribbles on these notes.
I know.
I'm so bad. That's why I waited until he starts.
Yeah, I apologize. I was a slide ahead. So we're going to talk a little bit about problems here. A majority of the Roman people were what we call citizen farmers. So these are exactly like they sound. They're citizens that farm the land. Yes. This is not difficult. But here's the key to them. These are the type of people that are on the outskirts of the Roman Empire. These are the type of people that typically are not going to be involved in the day-to-day operations of Rome. They are going to be largely disconnected from the... Well, and that's why I'm trying to bring it here, so that way you understand why they matter. Otherwise, you're right. Why would we care about them? So many of these people struggled to pay their taxes. They struggled to pay off their loans on their land. And so let's say that we're going to use Justin today. And so Justin, in order to pay your taxes, you have to farm. And what do you think if you had to be a farmer, what kind of crop would you farm? This is for Justin. What? Cotton. Okay. So, very well. We can use that. So, Justin has his cotton farm. And Justin has his piece of land. And when you took over the farm from your father, it was under the leadership of the Greek Empire. And the Greeks allowed you to farm, and you kind of used to that system. Well, the Romans come in and they take over, and you're a little worried about what's going to happen. But the Romans say, as long as you pay your taxes, the only requirement that we ask of you is what? Do you remember what we talked about? Send troops. So in the event that Rome goes to war, we're going to call up Justin. We're going to say, Justin, we need you to send troops. We need you to send people from your family to come help out the Roman army. Now, Justin does not have any children. It's just him and his wife living on the homestead farming here. He's got a couple of farmhands, but they have their own families. And so when Rome goes to war, they come up to Justin. They say, Justin, you got to go to war.
My wife is dead.
No, unfortunately you can't. And I'm not sure why you would.
Because look at him. You want to put him in the middle.
Ladies, take note of...
I
already did.
Yeah, okay.
I'm marrying him anyway right now.
All right, so let's refocus. So Justin has to go to war. What happens to Justin's farm while he's gone? It dies. So, okay, just hear me out. Hear me out. Now, while Justin may leave behind a few family members, without the head of the home there, without the person who is primarily doing the manual labor, yes, his wife may try to keep the farm going, but typically they would work together let's keep our inappropriate comments to ourselves. They would work together to produce enough to make the money they needed to pay off their debts. With half of the labor force gone, so one out of the two people, and the main laborer gone, she can't keep up with all the demands of the hard work of the field. So therefore, the farm can't make enough money to pay for itself, which means that when it's tax time and they show up a year later and they say, hey, Justin, you got to pay your taxes. Well, I was out serving in the army. I don't have any money to pay taxes. And now the Roman government comes in, they take his land and take his farm, and he has no way to make money and survive. That's why we're talking about these citizen farmers. Because there were many, many, many of these in the Roman Empire. And so many of these guys, they had to give up on their farms, give up on their homeland, and they had to go to the city and try to find low-paying jobs. But the difficulty with that was that when they got to Rome, when they got to the city and tried to find these low-paying jobs, many of them were already filled by slaves. And so they had no way of getting themselves any sort of income. So they went to the government and they said, you got us in this mess, help us get out. And there were these masses of citizen farmers, masses of people who were poor, that had nowhere else to turn, that they go to the government, and the government at this point is not willing to help them.
Why?
Because the government couldn't have any, they weren't going to gain anything from them. They were too dirt poor to do anything and to provide any tax money, and the government was going to be worried about the people who could pay taxes and help them out. Now, that's part of the initial underlying problem that we had with the Republic, is that many of the people who were elected into office were only cared about those that could help them. The Senate had grown in power and it increased their power. And the tribal assembly that was supposed to be looking out for the underclass, or the lower class people, this is not high school, the lower class, and those who were supposed to be watching out for the plebeians were not taking advantage of the tools and of the power that they had. And so essentially they allowed the power to escape out of them. The wealthy gained more wealth, the poor became more poor. And there was this massive divide between the upper class and the lower class in Rome. And if you were part of the upper class, life was good. If you're part of the lower class, not so much. Though they were already into play, it just divided the gap. Yeah, the gap became worse. Right.
The wealthy had to go to war too, right?
Yes, but often they could find somebody to go for them. So if you've got Gavin over there who he's pretty wealthy and he knows Justin has nothing, he could tell Justin, hey, Justin, I'll give you this tiny little corner of my property that might grow weeds if you'll go to war for me. Well, Justin has nothing, so he'll take that, and he'll put his family in that tiny little corner of Gavin's property, and he'll risk going to war for him. So, well, what else are you going to do?
He would die.
Sit on the street and beg?
But if you didn't go to war, then what happened?
If you refused,
Yeah.
then they put you in jail.
Yeah.
Put you in prison.
The chances are like rebellion. Oh wait.
Yeah. So if you read through the New Testament, the Apostle Paul spent a number of days in prison. No, had nothing to do with war. But you can get a feel for what a Roman prison was like. Read through the New Testament. Read through Apostle Paul. They had usually had a jailer there. Remember the story where the jail's doors open and the jailer's about ready to kill himself, and Paul says, hey, no, we're here. It was pretty serious duty to be guarding those jails in the Roman prisons. Yes, ma'am.
The jails were basically like you had to have someone come and bring you food, right? Yeah.
I don't know for sure.
I forget where I heard that, but
It could.
I'm
It could be.
fairly sure it's accurate.
It could be.
Is that where it happened?
Yeah. Okay.
I don't remember. I just remember the
Yeah.
information.
Okay.
Right. So like people had to
No, yeah, but I mean, you're getting free housing.
I asked him, I still have to tell what
Now, corruption in Rome continued to spread. The wealthy became more wealthy, the poor became more poor. And there's a particular group of people that you may recognize from Scripture, and they are called publicans. Does anybody know what a publican is? It does, yes. Jesus is specifically called out for hanging out and eating dinner with publicans and sinners. What is a publican?
Aren't they tax collectors?
Yes, they're tax collectors. Very good. So publicans are tax collectors. So here's how it works. Victoria is my publican. She's going to be my tax collector. I am the head of the Roman state, and I'm going to tell Victoria, I need you to go collect taxes from everybody in the classroom. Everybody needs to pay $5 in taxes this month. So you are going to. So you're going to go around and you're going to get $5 from everybody, and you're going to pay that to me as the tax, the Roman tax. Now, I'm going to send her off. She's going to go do her work, and she's going to come back to me in the next month with $5 per person. Okay? Now, this is a private conversation between Victoria and I. Victoria turns around and she comes knocking on your door, and first day she walks up to your house and she says, "It's time to pay your taxes. It's going to cost you $10."
No. Yes, please.
So she has the government's authority to arrest you or to take away your family members if you don't pay.
But what if you claim you don't live there?
Doesn't matter. If they come calling for taxes, you are under the Roman government. It's not like today where people take vacations. Okay? So
Vacation to jail.
she's going to come up, she's going to collect,
I don't live
jail is
here.
vacation pretty much.
she's going to collect
I live in
$10 from every one of you.
Okay.
And as she collects that $10, what does she have to turn in to me? $5 per person. She's collected 10. Who keeps the difference?
The government.
No lie.
Victoria.
No one likes
That's
you.
why nobody liked public.
That's why nobody likes publicans, because
They
when
was scamming
she
everybody.
came knocking on your door, you knew what she was doing, but you couldn't prove it.
Isn't that how
You
they
feel
make
like
their
somebody
money?
does-
That's exactly how they make their money, yes.
Like the government didn't pay them.
The government doesn't pay it. Like, I'm not going to pay you, so I just tell you, whatever you need to keep, you keep for yourself, but I need $5 per
Wait,
person.
so that was legal?
It was legal, yes.
I mean, what else are they supposed to do though? They have to make their money
What
somewhere.
about all
You're
the
right,
poor
okay.
people?
All right, Gavin brings up a point here.
To travel back.
Gavin says, well, what else are they supposed to do? Okay, you're right. It was commonly accepted. So Victoria, she knows that she probably only needs about $1 per person in order to live comfortably. But she's going to ask you for an additional $5. Now, you're not going to know that, but she is taking more than what she needs. That's why people hate the publicans. It was okay. It's kind of like when you go to a restaurant and you tip. It's common knowledge, at least it should be, that when you go to a place where you have somebody serving you, you're supposed to tip them.
Wait, what? You are?
Yes, you are. You all need to know that.
I did that on
And
accident.
so it was a similar thing for these publicans, that it was common knowledge that part of your taxes went to pay their salary. But many of these people went above and beyond, and they charged extra 2 or 3 times. We can look at Zacchaeus as an example of that, where he was extorting money from people. He was taking more than what he should have, and there's nothing that you as a citizen could do about it. You report him to the police, which you report him to the centurions, the Roman government, they're just going to say, deal with it. That's not something that they were going to arrest people for. So that's important not only for history, but also for understanding biblical New Testament knowledge. Do they still do that? No.
No.
Republicans.
No. The United States has the IRS. We are not going to go into a conversation about the IRS, but they are paid a separate salary anyway, so no big deal there.
So I don't think I've
There's a
ever
ton of
heard a good
lawyers.
thing about the IRS. And
There's a bunch of memes about
I
it.
have a friend I graduated with works for IRS. So,
now you guys aren't friends. No, I'm just kidding.
no, he went to law school. We were not best friends, but he went to law school and then got a job for the IRS, and he's doing well. He just goes after people that don't pay their taxes. That's all, and he prosecutes them.
Different.
Anyway, let's move on. One of the things that Rome failed to do was that Rome failed to make changes and failed to reform when they saw problems. And so we have one particular guy here that we need to take note of is Tiberius.
Hey,
Scipio.
Scipio.
You get him.
Now, with Tiberius, he became the spokesman for the common man. And so he saw the problems in society and he began to speak out for them and try to do what he could. And what he proposed to the Senate was that they would take all of their newly conquered lands and they would divide it among the poor people and give them something so that they could live. So guys like Justin, who had nowhere else to turn, could now come to the government and say, look, I've got nothing. And the government would say, well, we just conquered this new territory out in Spain, so why don't you move out there? You can have that piece of land. It's yours. Give him a fresh start and a new outlook on life.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Jones. Thank you.
Well, then he can stay in his current
Misery.
miserable state. Now, Tiberius had a great idea, and people began talking about it. He tried to get reelected as a tribune, but in the midst of his attempt to get reelected, he was killed. Reelection was not allowed for the tribune members. They were a one-and-done type of election, so they wanted to rotate it. Well, he thought he was not done, so he tried to change that rule, and people didn't like that, so they killed him.
I thought they liked him.
Well, some people like. Yeah, there's a lot of murder going on in
So,
Rome.
Which is bad.
would that technically be like,
That's the way to go.
like if Obama had
What is
run
the way to
for
go? Murder?
Queen's
I-
Residency and we killed him without his police?
Yeah.
Guillotine.
Yeah, a little bit like that.
Okay.
Sure.
Okay.
So he had a brother. His name was Gaius Gracchus, and he wanted to carry on his brother's ideas.
He probably got bullied.
I thought the guy said it was Gaius.
I'm pretty sure that back then it only had the first definition of the term.
Now, his claim to fame here was that he also got killed.
Very much like
So I think it's going to be interesting when you go back and listen to this how much stoppage we have in class
Just stop.
due to the incessant laughter that goes on. So he gets killed because of the fact that his enemies did not like what he stood for. So yes, as somebody mentioned, there's a lot of murder happening, a lot of discontent with the current way of life, and so that seems to be their best solution. When they don't like a leader's ideas, that they're going to have him killed. Yeah.
Mr. Jones. His layers on this.
I didn't get that.
It's on Canvas. It's on the slides are on Canvas. The recording will be on Canvas. Yes, some of you have it downloaded.
I do. Well,
So-
not down there.
You can go back and see that later.
Can you go back?
Dude, I just-
So all of this is going into Civil War. Well, this is on Canvas, yes. It is on Canvas. So you can find it. So as you saw John Green talked about, there are a couple of civil wars that happen as a result of the discontent from the upper class to the lower class, as well as the inability for the government to work efficiently. Now here's where we really need to be cautious and careful about where we are in the United States right now. We have set up our government differently from how Rome did. I think we understand that we are not the same type of government, but there are some principles that remain the same. And I think the big thing that we need to take away from this is when the government refuses to listen to the will of the people are going to revolt and it turns into a civil war. And the United States did go through our own civil war. We did have that issue. Could we get there again? It may be possible. But let's talk Rome here in their first civil war. The first guy is Marius, and he is the man led by the common people, or he leads the common people. So please make sure that you associate him with the common man. And he's the first man to put together a professional army. He becomes so popular among the common people like Justin that have nowhere else to turn that they devote themselves to Marius as their leader. And so, roll with me on this. So Marius now tells Justin, if you follow me, serve in my army, then you're going to be rewarded when we win. And so, well, yeah, that's the cost of war sometimes. But it's
If you live, you get this.
so it's the trade-off there. You take a risk for a great reward. Now, most of these people that served under Marius served for personal financial gain, or they served because they knew they were going to get something in the end of it, not because of patriotism for their country. And so they were more devoted to Marius than they were to Rome itself. So the Roman government has to defend itself against uprisings led by guys like Marius. So Sulla is the guy who is elected to lead the Senate. What? Yeah, makes sense. Kind of alliterated. And the Senate wins. And so the established government defeats the uprising. And when he wins, he took over and declared himself dictator. This is a total takeover of power. And when he does that, his goal and his attempt is to revive the previous power of the Senate that had once been there. He's going to do everything he can to make the Senate the most powerful of all the parts of the government. Now, his goal in all of this was that he would make the Senate powerful and that he would hand the power over to the Senate. Unfortunately, the leadership in the Senate at that time was not strong enough to hold the power, and so they lost control very quickly. Now, we're going to fast forward a little bit. We're going to see something happen very similar to this in England. And Oliver Cromwell is going to do something very similar with England's Parliament. So just keep that in the back of your mind. Oliver Cromwell is in that video game? I've never played that game, so I couldn't verify that.
There's same as people.
Okay. Well, we're not going to go into video games today. Awesome. Civil War number 2. When the Senate is unable to maintain power, there is a group of 3 that are that step up to take over Rome. It's called the triumvirate. So it's a rule of 3. After the Senate is unable to maintain power. This is the next group that steps up and they take over the leadership.
So like, they had like 3 consuls basically?
Yes.
Or they were each like a leader of the branches or something?
They were each kind of like 3 dictators that worked together. And I'm going to explain their roles here momentarily. So the first of the triumvirate was Crassus, and he was Rome's richest guy. So essentially, they were using him for his money to be able to help fund the army and to help fund the government. Now, they needed that. They needed money to do that. But he was an important part of it because of the money that he offered. He didn't rule in this triumvirate very long because he died on an expedition out in Asia. So he was only part of this for a short period of time. We have Julius Caesar. And he was a nephew of Marius, and he was a hero of the common man. He was a military man. He built a lot of his power in Gaul, which is modern-day France, in some of the battles that he fought. He led people through that territory. He is well known for the training of his military and his men as he trained them in the army. And we're not going to comment on the commentaries here, but this is where we get a lot of the source for what we know about Julius Caesar before he came back to Rome. Then our third guy here is Pompey. And he had the support of the Senate. And as we study a little bit about him, he was very jealous of Julius Caesar's popularity. He did not like the fact that everybody loved Caesar, that Caesar was everybody's favorite. Caesar was so strong. Caesar was on the cover of every magazine. He was on all the news channels.
They didn't have those.
Oh, yeah, you're right.
That his face was written in all the
He
stone
was on the-
tablets.
There you go.
He was the face of every piece of
On the
stone
coin.
slab they sent out.
There we go.
Salty, he had statues everywhere.
Yeah.
Probably defaced him.
Yeah.
Probably tore him down.
Yeah. He had, well.
Probably graffitied them.
Okay, so because Pompey was in charge of the Senate, he maintained a certain amount of power and control. And so he decided that, and this is the bullet point under Pompey as well. He decides that he is going to order Caesar back to Rome. So he believes that he has the power to do that, and Caesar gets wind of it, and he hears what Pompey's up to, and so he knows that when he gets back to Rome that Pompey is going to try to take over, and he's going to try to put Caesar into prison and get rid of his army. And so Caesar decides that instead of letting that happen, he's going to bring his army into Rome, and he is going to, as you saw John Green talk about, essentially march on his home city, and he's going to take over the city with his loyal army. And so when he comes back, he returns to Rome. He declares war on Rome. So it'd be kind of like one of our military generals coming back from Afghanistan or coming back from, I guess, anywhere in the Pacific and deciding they're going to march on Washington, D.C. and take over the country. Yep.
So, how would he use it? Like, what would give him the power to do that? Would he just manipulate his
Because he had a
the
big
military?
army.
Okay, think about it this way. In our country, we have the president who all of our military generals have to answer to him, and he has the power to fire any of those military generals. So if President Trump fired one of our top military generals and the general said, you know what, no, and he takes his men, and his men are more loyal to the general than they are to the United States, then he says, hey men, we're going to go march on Washington, and I'm going to take over the government.
Well, yeah, I
That'd be
get
so
that
lit.
part.
Okay.
But, I mean, firing someone and killing it or throwing them into jail are different. So, like, if Pompey, is that what you said?
Yeah.
Anyway, if he wanted Julius Caesar to come back just so he could throw him in jail or
Yep.
possibly murder him,
Mhm.
like, why would he not get in trouble for that?
I see what you're asking. Okay. Um,
City named Pompeii, they had a volcanic eruption.
so
That's what
you didn't have to go through the judicial system like we do today. They didn't necessarily have that system set up. As far as how would he have excused that away, other than saying that making up something as far as Julius Caesar was a threat to our nation, I don't know how he would have answered that. And maybe that's something that we just need to do a little bit more digging into and find out. But my guess is, and he probably would have just said Caesar was a threat somehow. Good.
How would he take over? Is it just like he would kill so many people and they would have to
talking about Caesar?
Like with
Yeah.
Edward.
So essentially, the way that you take over government is by getting the loyalty of people more loyal to you than to anybody else. And so he already had the military to support that. All he had to do now was get the government to recognize him as the leader instead of Pompey. So if he comes in, he uses his army, he kills enough people that refuse to acknowledge him, then he becomes leader. Yeah. So if you want to take over your own country someday, get enough people to follow you,
Sounds lit.
march on that city, and see what you can do.
Alright, who wants to help me take over Faith?
No takers. Good. Now, Pompey sees what's coming. Pompey is afraid. He runs out of Rome. He flees to Greece. He doesn't even stay to watch the battle unfold because he knows that if Caesar catches him, Caesar's going to do bad things to him.
And he dies.
So he gets out of there. Yeah, you're right. He does. So he flees, gets out of there, goes to Greece. And yes, he dies in Greece. Caesar's declared dictator for life.
Wait, so did they declare him out, or did he declare himself?
Well, okay, so he appointed himself dictator. Well,
Because I know that sometimes like dictators will
Yeah.
appoint themselves under a different name.
right. Okay, so we're getting more technical than what I intended, but that's okay. So, but that's fine. So Caesar comes in and he takes over the government, and he essentially says, the government's corrupt, I'm here to clean it up. The people are so loyal to him that they say, we want you as our only source of government, which essentially is a dictatorship. So he did not utter the words, I'm now the dictator.
Right.
But when we look back at it, we can say, yes, he was a dictator. But he did a lot of good things.
Right.
Yeah. So he stopped a lot of the government practices. And he also established the colonies that others before him had tried to do. So he is looking out for the common man like most of the people had wanted him to. He is not working for selfish gain. Just as a trivia question for when you're on Jeopardy someday, he also helped develop the 365-day calendar.
I'm curious about what the calendar.
Wait, is that the one we use?
No, Gavin.
So the
Is it
Gregorian?
365?
Yeah,
So
Gregorian,
it's
yep.
Gregorian, yep. So was the city of Pompeii had to do with the other dude? Or
That's a
was
good question. I don't know
'cause
enough about it.
It's spelled differently though.
Yeah.
Didn't it say that he was connected with Pompey somehow? Maybe.
But it's spelled with two
See,
I's, so it's kind
I think it's
Yeah.
unrelated, but I don't know enough about that city to be able to
Isn't
do
that
that.
when like there was like I just know this from the Vatican Museum.
Volcano.
Volcano erupting, yeah.
Somebody
Yeah.
died.
But I don't cover that very much in history, and I don't remember the details. So I hesitate to confirm or deny because it's all on recording, and you're going to come back and play that back later and say, no, you're wrong.
Mr. Jones was wrong.
I'm okay being wrong. I am wrong quite often. You guys know that. And I'm okay with that as long as we find out the right answer. So, March 15th of 44 BC, Caesar's assassinated by his enemies. And you wonder, okay, well, why? Why didn't people like Caesar? Why did this have to happen?
Taxes.
Well, we're going to look into that here in just a moment a little bit. So don't leave that thought yet. We'll come back to Caesar's assassination. But I do need to finish out with the Third Civil War. We have, when Caesar is now out of power, we have two guys vying for that power, and they're named Mark Antony and Octavian.
Wait, isn't Octavian from the Vatican Museum?
That's gross.
I don't know. It could be.
Because he's the other Roman soldier. Because there's the country guy.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I didn't know that.
Very nice. Yeah. So these guys tried to punish the guys that murdered Caesar. They're trying to stick up for him. And they were the two most qualified and best options to run the country. And so they divide the Roman territory in half, and each one takes a half. And they attempt to rule Rome by two different leadership styles. Excuse me. Yeah, it typically doesn't.
You need to compromise.
So in 31 BC, there's a naval battle at Actium. And Octavian wins that battle because, well, we've skipped a number of events here, but Mark Antony and Octavian end up going to war with each other. This is the Third Civil War. So there is the naval battle here of Actium. Octavian wins. Mark Antony retreats. He commits suicide, which then,
Because
yeah. Look, listen, history is full of people that die. It's just part of life and death. But yeah, it's still not funny to
Okay, the point is,
go back and replay the tape. I said life and death. It's part of life and death. So Octavian becomes ruler of the entire nation of Rome at age 31. Yeah, average lifespan was in the 30s, but if you're the ruler, you typically not the emperor. He didn't go into battle.
Emperor.
Not usually.
Probably the consul.
Well, we're transitioning to empire now.
Oh. Army.
There it is.
Good.
So the Roman Empire is established under the rule of Octavian. Now, once again, this is a historical look back on the details. He didn't say, well, we are now officially an empire. We look back on it, we can say that is the time at which we can pinpoint seeing Rome's growth, seeing Rome's power. When Octavian took over, that's really the point at which we classify them as an empire. And he called his rule, he called his government, or himself, as imperator. Imperator means commander of a victorious army. Well, what word does that look like?
Emperor.
Looks like emperor, yeah. So that's where we get our term empire, emperor from, is imperator, because he was commanding a victorious army. He was the highest commander of that army, and so he appointed himself leader. Yeah.
So he was the emperor or just the imperator?
Well, he was the imperator, and eventually that transformed into what we call and know as emperor.
But he wasn't officially.
In his day, no, they would not have called him emperor. We would look back on him now, we would say, yes, he was what we think of as an emperor. Just like if we were looking back at any other historical civilization before this, we would say, well, that was an emperor. But they wouldn't have necessarily been called that.
I think so.
For the next 500 years, imperators or emperors will rule Rome under their power and control. So this establishes a long line and many generations of rulers and leadership in Rome because of Octavian's efforts here.